You're listening to the Two Tongues Podcast. And now your hosts, Kyle and Chris.
Andiamo.
Buongiorno.
What's andiamo mean? I don't even know. It's definitely
Aviato. Did you ever watch that?
Yeah, that's that show Silicon
Yes,
Valley?
you betcha.
Yeah, that was a great show.
I just rewatched that recently.
Yeah.
Yep. Because I was watching something else on HBO. We were watching True Detective with Aunt Linda.
Gotcha.
She likes that kind of thing. So Aunt Linda, she's 70 plus years old, and she likes
suspense.
She likes those like
crime
detective.
drama.
They had crime drama. That's what I'm talking about. But if you leave her to her own devices, you know she's watching like Hawaii 5-0 or something.
Gotcha.
Or not even Hawaii 5-0. Isn't that
CSI?
Isn't that the comedy one? Hawaii 5-0.
Hawaii 5-0. I don't know what Hawaii 5-0 is.
One of them's got a Lonely Island in it.
Oh no, that's Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Oh, so it's Hawaii 5-0 then.
Yeah,
so that's the caliber of detective show she watches when left to her own devices.
Yeah.
So my wife and I decided we were going to introduce her to some
real shit.
Yeah.
That first season was good. I didn't watch the second season. I couldn't get into it.
Yeah, it was good. The new one, the one with Jodie Foster.
Didn't even know there was a new one.
It's called like Night County or something. It takes place in Alaska during that period where it's like 3 months of dark.
Gotcha.
And the way they have it, the way they do it, like cinematically.
Vampires.
No, that would be cool. But it does have this element of supernatural to it, which the other ones did not have at all. So it's kind of strange.
Yeah.
But they do this thing where it's like they made the show into loosely the myth of the triumph of the sun. So there's this very ancient myth that we see all over the world that has to do with the night journey of the sun, right? When the sun goes into the underworld. Right? The sun is the culture hero. The sun is Jesus Christ, for lack of a better phrase. It goes into the underworld, which Jesus did when he was crucified. He goes into Hades for 3 days, right? So that's that whole story. And then the triumph of the sun is the triumph. The hero defeats the dragon of chaos, and the rebirth occurs. It's the same story when you have ancient societies worshiping the spring, like the spring equinox, the triumph of the sun over the winter and in death. Mm-hmm. It's the story of Jesus, the triumph over death. It's the same fucking myth we have across all of time and history. And they took this episode of or this season of True Detective, and they loosely made it based on this myth. So the idea is every episode, it tells you how many days into the night, into the period of night they're in. Mm-hmm. And you're just counting down, getting deeper and deeper into the dark, right? Into the, hopelessness. And then the idea is at some point shit turns around. I haven't got there yet, but at some point shit turns around and the sun comes back and the hero wins. So I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. Sounds interesting. Jodie Foster, eh? Jodie fucking Foster. Did you ever see the movie Jarhead?
If I did, it's been a long time. I'm pretty sure it's Jake Gyllenhaal. Yeah, military
Jamie
movie.
Foxx, yeah. Marines.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. It's one of my favorite, like, more modern military movies. But the name that all the Marines use for the guy who is at home fucking their wife is Jody.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the guys are all
mythical Jody.
Yeah. So the guys are all out fighting for freedom, and their wives are back home getting railed
by Jody.
It's really terrible, man. But it's
it's awful.
It happens.
Oh yeah,
like it's super common.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I used to work for this lady who was in the Navy. I may have told you this story before. Shout out to Keisha. She was really cool about talking to me about like black things that I would be uncomfortable.
Black things.
I would be uncomfortable asking about as a white man. But I was a lot younger back then. She was a little older than me. So she took me to school, man. She told me about the paper bag rule and all these things I didn't know about, where if your skin is darker than a paper bag, then you're considered lower class than among black people. I had no idea. I was completely blown away.
Yeah.
But another thing she blew me away with was to tell me that when she was in the Navy and you're on the ship and you're out for months, that married people on the ship just pair up. They get a ship husband or a ship wife, and that's the person they fuck while they're out. And you have a vested interest in keeping the secret, because when you get back to shore, you go right back to your family and kids.
What? Oh, this is in like the Navy?
The Navy, yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't like make that connection at first. I was like, who goes on a cruise without their but
No,
I
yeah,
guess that makes sense.
she was a Navy person.
Navy. In the Navy. That's like, it's like notoriously a lot of gay dudes in the Navy too,
I mean,
these gay dudes have ship husbands themselves.
yeah, probably.
What are you gonna like dispute the gay dudes in the Navy thing?
Well, I guess maybe like I guess I'm struggling to figure out whether I heard that rumor.
Oh, really?
You like the only thing that comes to my mind is a sailor. That's from
no, dude. It's definitely else. You may not have heard it, but it's definitely like a thing.
Yeah.
Gay dudes, gay fellers in the Navy.
Teach their own.
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that there would be a lot of gay guys in the military in general because lots of dudes,
True. Lots of in shape dudes if you want to.
Lots of jacked gay dudes.
Find some. Yeah. Give me my signing bonus, baby.
Yeah.
Send me to the Navy.
To
Jesus.
Yeah. But dude, it's funny talking about that. I just saw something. I actually didn't watch the video, but it was like some person who's in the military being out and proud and like a fucking just as queer as possible.
Yeah.
And dude, if I was in charge of things, you wouldn't be allowed to say that. Like I would almost go back to like the Bill Clinton thing. I don't even know if what the policy "don't ask, don't tell" was really all about. It's like slipping my mind, but no, don't tell people. Don't talk about that. Like if you're into like being a furry and shit like that.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be like a badass member of our fighting force. You can't be out here being fucking embarrassingly gay.
And you should be embarrassed if you dress up like a fucking furry as a grown man.
You should be embarrassed in a lot of that sexual degeneracy, man. I think we should shame that shit more.
Yeah. We had a conversation about shame before. It was difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
I got mixed feelings about shame.
I'm a big fan
of shame. What was I going to ask you?
The answer is no.
Shit, man. I don't know. How goes Lutheran church?
It's good.
Did you go today?
I did. Of course I did. Yeah. Every Sunday, man. Every Sunday, every Thursday, any day in between that I can get.
What do you do on Thursday? Bible study?
Bible study. Yeah.
What was the message today?
It was Trinity Sunday, so they were talking a lot about the Trinity and the nature of it and things like that.
It's an interesting topic.
It is. I don't know if I want to say heavy, but yeah, it's like it's a lot to understand,
I have this theory, and maybe it's like super biased, and I'm just going to say it anyway. You know how like Jews and Muslims object to this idea of the Trinity on the basis of
they're like, well, you worship more than one God.
Yeah, on the basis of polytheism. Yeah. But sometimes I think, especially after listening to that podcast you did with the two Orthodox dudes and talking like so deeply about theology, Christian theology, I wonder if like those ideas are just too complicated for some people to understand. And they, rather than attempting to wrestle with it, they just poo-poo the whole thing and say, "No, you worship the devil."
Yeah.
No, you're a polytheist.
Yeah, could be. It's funny. Episode that I are doing it was based on an episode of a podcast called Stone Choir, which I still love Stone Choir. I understand that a lot of the Orthodox people who have been driven to our podcast by that podcast I did might not think very highly of Corey and Woe. I love Corey and Woe. I love Stone Choir as a podcast. It's a great podcast. They're a little off base on Eastern Orthodoxy.
Maybe.
I'm fine accepting that. But they had an episode where dude, it's a very controversial podcast. Okay.
Like this episode you're going to talk about, or in general? It's
in general.
Okay,
yeah. But they've had some more what's the word? Controversial than others. Some of them are like really controversial.
Yeah.
But one of them they were talking about racial things. And it was broken up into like 5 episodes. And one of them was about IQ. And they were talking about how like a mentally retarded person can be saved. But they're not going to like understand as fully and deeply as a person who's like high IQ. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
It's not like if you are, like sub 75 IQ that you're like damned to hell.
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind there is some of those phrases that Jesus says in the New Testament about being like little children.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if people with low IQ or retarded people, handicapped people, whether they have a leg up in terms of salvation.
It's a good question.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they can't help but have faith like little children.
Yeah. So they're at a disadvantage in the here and now, but they're at an advantage in the hereafter.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the trade.
Yeah.
I used to have a different opinion about this. I used to think that
retarded people all are going to hell. Like they're all fucked, man.
I'm jumping from topic to topic. No, it's the idea. It's like kind of a eugenics idea.
Oh,
when I was younger, I used to think about
get rid of them.
Used to think about the quality of life and the cruelty that people express to people that are different. And I just thought to myself, like, it would be better for people to be to not have to deal with that. Like, it would be better if you didn't live, like, so that you don't have to deal with it. And I like legitimately believed that for a while when I was younger. But as I get older, I kind of shift away from that. Somebody said something to me one time about, I'm trying to remember how they put it. It was just something along the lines of human beings being an expression of the divine spark or something. And, like that comes in a variety of shapes and sizes, infinitely. And who am I to say any one expression is better than another, that it should be snuffed out?
Yeah.
And then people who have like siblings or close relatives or family that have Down syndrome or whatever, they know what those people's lives are like, and they say the complete opposite. They're like, no, those are the happiest people on earth. Yeah. Those people, no, they're not suffering.
They're the happiest people in the world.
Yeah.
Yep. Shane Gillis talks about that a lot.
Oh yeah,
because he's got like a retarded cousin or something like that.
I remember him talking about that.
Yeah.
So Stone Choir, tell me more about what they talk about.
They're Lutheran. They go to the same kind of Lutheran church that I go to, LCMS, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, which is just a branch of Lutheranism that was established here in the 1800s by people who came here from Germany, who were, they had issues with the way things were going in Germany, so they were like, we're gonna fuck off across the sea and start our own branch of Lutheranism. It's like, the reason that I was attracted to it was, A, there's a bunch of them. It's like not hard to find an LCMS church. And B, it's like a conservative. It's out of the branches of Lutheran churches, it's like one of the more conservative
Gotcha.
ones.
So do those guys talk mostly like religious topics or political?
Oh, yeah, there's some crossover into politics, but it's pretty much a theology, Lutheran theology podcast.
And what got them to talking about Eastern Orthodoxy? Was that something they were like doing on their own?
Eastern Orthodoxy, especially in the online sphere, is blowing up. It's becoming more and more popular.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So that's one thing in that episode that we didn't really get into. I think John touched on it a little bit. I am curious how much this online popularity of Orthodoxy is transferring over into people going to liturgy and actually becoming Orthodox. Now, I know that it is somewhat. I hear people, I hear people say, I got baptized or I'm a catechumen. And I hear people who have been Orthodox say, you know, my church has like 28 catechumens.
Wow. Yeah.
So it is, I have no doubt that there are real people doing it in real life, but I do wonder, I think that a lot of these people online who talk about Orthodoxy aren't really doing it. They just like the theology.
Yeah.
They don't go to church. And I don't think that that's like strictly an Orthodox thing either. I think that there's a bunch of people who talk up Christianity, and ostensibly they believe, but they're not actually living the Christian life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we've said this before, but I think that Christianity has become countercultural, and that's only going to bring more people into it.
Yeah.
But on top of that, in the United States, if you're going to return to Christianity, and maybe your parents weren't strictly religious, maybe your grandparents weren't. If you're going to get back into it in the United States, what's more countercultural than readopting Christianity, other than readopting a branch of Christianity which has almost no footprint in the United States, a foreign Eastern Orthodoxy? I mean, I don't mean that in any insulting way, but in the United States, it is on the fringes of Christianity. It's like people haven't even heard of it.
Yeah.
Like I had zero knowledge of Orthodoxy until you fucking started talking about it.
And I didn't really have much knowledge of Orthodoxy until I started hearing people like Buck Johnson and Matt Erickson talking about it. So
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I live fairly close to a Greek Orthodox church. And I had known that church, I knew it was a Greek church. I knew it was ethnically a lot of Greek people went there, but I didn't really have any idea that it was like a wildly kind of different, version of Christianity. Yeah. I thought it was just like kind of, probably more a little closer to Catholicism in the terms of like tradition and stuff like that. But just that they probably believe the same thing that, pretty much all of us believe. Yeah. And I do think that there's some truth to that. I think they do believe a lot of the same stuff.
Would you say that Eastern Orthodoxy is as far away on the Christian spectrum from evangelical Protestant Christianity as it's possible to be?
I don't know. That's something that I'm interested in. Is like really like nailing down what the differences are, because I know that there are differences, but when you talk to or you listen to people like we'll just say Corey and Woe from Stone Choir, like a lot of the Christianity that I was brought up in, it's like very shallow, the people in the congregation don't have a deep understanding of the theology.
True.
But that's not the case with there are versions of Protestant Christianity where people take it very seriously as well. So I would like to know what the differences are between those Protestants who do take it very seriously and like Orthodox and Catholic. I know that there are differences, but I don't know, man. I want to like bring the churches together as much as possible. Like I know that there are probably some gaps that are never going to be bridged.
Yeah.
And it's going to be an uphill battle for sure. I don't know if I'm up to the task, but this is a lot of this, like, I don't believe that those people are Christians kind of thing that really bothers me.
Yep.
I feel like we all believe enough of the same stuff that you can consider these people Christians,
It's an interesting take. Like what comes to my mind is listening to David Patrick Harry rant on and on and on about the Gnostic religions and how central orthodoxy is. Even the word orthodoxy is clearly like it's a counterpoint to the Gnostic traditions. It's like, no, there's an orthodox perspective, and what you're talking about is something else. So they spent historically a lot of time quashing different ideas in Christianity. The Orthodox and Catholic Church, which at the time was not a different thing, right?
Yep.
And then now what you're saying is all of those things that tore apart denominations within Christianity. Can't we all just be friends? But the Orthodox position has always been very seems to be, to me, very anti that. It's like, even when I read Friar Rose's book, The Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, his whole thing about ecumenism being a bad thing was centrally focused on Christians teaching things that aren't orthodox and ruining it for everybody.
Yeah.
And but when I say ruining it, I mean ruining salvation.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't believe this stuff to the T, you know,
you're going to hell.
You're going to hell.
Yeah.
And you're worshiping the devil.
Yeah. That tends to be, going to hell tends to be a side effect of worshiping the devil, you know.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand. Yeah. I don't know, man. What, just in general, what do you think of that episode?
I want to talk about that. I really like that. But before I do, I want to tell you, I watched a documentary the other day called St. Herman of Alaska.
Oh yeah.
Do you know St. Herman of Alaska?
Yeah, I know some stuff about St. Herman of Alaska.
I had no idea, never heard of him, but apparently he was a Russian Orthodox priest. And there was a time when there was a lot of Russians in Alaska, right? It's basically
Makes
just
sense.
It's just Eastern Siberia, right?
Yeah.
From their perspective, but they were like island hopping over, and they were doing something. I don't know what they were doing. They were trading. I don't know what they were doing, but they were there.
Yeah.
And so the Orthodox Church sent priests. They were requested. They sent a bunch of priests there so that the people who were living there and trading there or whatever. First of all, I had no idea that there was like modern Western Russian settlements in Alaska before it was a state.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
You don't think about it, but as soon as you hear it, you're like, I guess that makes sense. It's, you know, like Sarah Palin says, she could see it from her backyard.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're called the Aleutian Islands. Those little islands that connect Russia from. Anyway, so Saint Herman is like the last of the Mohicans, basically. When all of the other Orthodox priests come and go, and he stuck around, and he was like, you know, building a community for the Indian tribes that live there, and he was like super involved. And I don't know what he did to become a saint, like what he did that resulted in him being called a saint. But when he died, he told the people that he wanted to be buried, not to wait for the church to show up and bury him and give him the rites, but just to bury him. And they waited a month to bury him because they were against his wishes. They were waiting for the Orthodox priest to show up. Apparently there was this gnarly storm, and they couldn't land. They were there, but they couldn't land.
Oh, gotcha.
And as soon as the people were like, it's been a month, let's just go ahead and bury him. This is getting ridiculous. It was one of those things where like he was uncorrupt. He had been sitting there for a month, and
I figured that was,
and he wasn't decomposing. He was perfect. And so they ended up burying him. And the moment he was in the ground, the story goes, the storms calmed.
Oh.
Because he told them he wanted them to bury him, not to wait.
Gotcha.
They refused, and the storms come up and don't subside until they obey.
Yeah.
Just thought that was kind of interesting.
What time period is this?
This was in the 1800s.
1800s.
This was like in the early, like I think maybe he died in like the 1830s, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
If memory serves.
Yeah. See, a lot of people will hear something like that and be like, that's just a myth, you know, that none of that really happened. I'm not so sure, man. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I mean, I say I'm not so sure. I tend to believe it, you know, just like kind of outright. But yeah, I think, you know, maybe a decade I might have. That's
Sure.
Yeah.
It's like the statue of the Virgin Mary that's crying blood tears.
Mhm.
You remember that story?
Yeah.
I don't know how long ago that was, but that was like a thing. And they're like trying to figure out an explanation for it, a scientific explanation for it.
Yeah.
It's weird. Okay. Anyway, back to the podcast. I keep forgetting the Greek feller's name.
Nectarios.
Man, it's a cool name.
Yeah.
You think I would remember it?
It's not his name.
Oh, that's just like a
Yeah.
thing that goes by.
So when you get taken into the church, you take on like a patron saint, and sometimes like they'll like take on that name.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Nectarios and John, first of all, they both seem like lovely fellas. They both seemed very knowledgeable. John especially seemed like a wealth of that all that knowledge. The whole time I listened to that episode, I wish I was on it.
Yeah.
But it would have been a totally different episode if I was on it. So I'm glad that I wasn't.
Yeah, well, that episode was about the Stone Choir episode. So yeah, you being on would have like taken it away from that and into more the stuff that you talk about.
No, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
I would have robbed that.
But we're gonna do that eventually. We're gonna get them on. We're gonna have them talk to you.
I'm excited about it.
Give you a good talking to.
I'm excited about it. It's interesting that Nectario said he listened to some of the ones that you sent him.
Yeah.
Were they my solo episode?
Yeah.
My solo episodes? Was it like the particularly like the blasphemous ones? Like is Christ the only God, man, and all those?
Yeah,
episodes?
I think I sent him that one.
Okay,
the one that you did about theosis.
Yes.
A few of them. I sent him like 4 of them.
Yeah. So here's my. I'm excited about it. I really am looking forward to this. I think this is a lot like the kind of conversations that I imagined I would be having on the podcast that I haven't really done much of yet. I'm concerned that one or both of those fellas is gonna take this as some kind of a challenge or a debate, which is not. It's not.
I don't think so. I know that out of the two of them, John is maybe more inclined to debate and things like that. But Nectario specifically is not much of a debater.
Okay.
Like he said some stuff in the podcast about how he thinks that it easily devolves into blood sports and that it's like not good for you.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want those fellas to know that I'm a student, right? And I feel honored that somebody with more knowledge than I have about Orthodoxy wants to share it with me. So as long as that's understood, it's like, hey, look, I'm hoping you learn something from me. I'd love to learn some shit from you. Let's have a conversation. I think it would be really fun because a couple of the topics that you guys brought up, you brought up hesychasm, and those guys were like, yeah, it's got no relation whatsoever to Eastern religion. And I'm just like, it's so clearly does. There's almost no argument. So I would love to dive into that. It's like, I think it's just a perspectival thing. It's just how are you looking at this? And I want to talk through that. It's like, okay, what does it mean? What does apophatic mean? How is God envisioned in an apophatic way? Because that conversation is exactly the same as talking about the Tao. It is exactly the same. So I would like to have that conversation.
I always get them mixed up. Apophatic is like describing God positively or negatively. Negatively.
Yeah.
So you can only describe God in what he is not.
Right.
Okay.
But I think that's a little bit wrong. And I think that's how they usually say it. I think the idea is that what God is unknowable. It's not, I can't describe what God is. I have to describe what it's not. I don't think there's anything that God is not.
Yeah.
That's my perspective. So I would say it's more, the point is more that God is unknowable. You can't put into words what God is. What's that word that they used to describe it? Noetic, I think, is one of those words they use to describe that. So that's how the Eastern religions talk about God, in Buddhism and Chinese Taoism and so forth. So I think that conversation would be interesting. But the theosis conversation, that's because I listen to people talk about theosis from the Orthodox perspective, and I feel like I can't help but feel like they're playing a game. They're playing a game because what they say is theosis means literally to become God. But they don't believe that's what it means. That's what I mean. That's part of the dance they're doing. It's like, no, the literal interpretation of the word is not what it really means. Okay, so why call it that? So they want to tiptoe around that. And then they want to say a bunch of things like to encounter God or to come close to God is something that's only possible through the mysteries and the sacraments of the church. So it gets back to this gatekeeper perspective that I really felt strongly when I was reading Father Seraphim Rose's book. I felt like the Orthodox Christians are the ultimate gatekeepers, And I feel very suspicious about that. It's like what they're saying is your access to theosis, the thing that you should want, even if you don't, you should want more than anything else. You can only get it through the church. You can only get it through what we have to offer to this, the properly done sacraments and the right. You can consider that you might find it on your own or somewhere else, but you can't. You can only funnel right into the church. That's the only place for it. And I feel like that's the same kind of logic that gives the Pope authority that the Pope doesn't have, right? It's the same kind of logic that caused people to in the Middle Ages to sell indulgences. I don't like it at all. It's like what you're saying is, and I get it, man. I understand that the Orthodox value tradition and the hundreds and hundreds of years of hard work that was been done by holy people to come to understand what things really mean and what the interpretation is of the scriptures. And I do not want to throw that away. But what they're saying is, without it, you ain't getting saved. Without it, you ain't getting the gold. You ain't getting theosis. And I think it puts an emphasis on the church as an institution, and it takes the emphasis away from the individual's spiritual experience, from the individual's experience. And so what I would like to say to John and Nectarios is, don't you think there's a difference between the experience that you have when you go to divine liturgy and the experience Moses had when he spoke to a burning bush? If you say to me that the mysteries of the burning bush are in the liturgy and there's nothing you're missing, then we have to have a different conversation, because I think that Moses in a burning bush is a personal religious experience. It's an encounter with God that happened from soul to soul.
Yeah.
And when you go to church, I think what you get is a secondhand version of that. What you get is a symbol showing you what this thing that you don't quite understand is real and possible if you just focus on it. If you just put your heart and will towards understanding it, that God will bring you into this experience. Yeah. That's what theosis seems to be. So I don't know. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think that all of that kind of boils down to the term, we used it in that episode called prelest.
Yes.
And I think that when you are having that experience by yourself, maybe it is God, but you don't know that it is. And you have to be careful of that sort of thing. And I think that you don't give that much credence because you think that everything is God.
I struggle with that.
Yeah. And I don't, I think there's some way in which it's, maybe there's some truth in saying that everything is God, or that everything is, at the very least, everything is a creation of God. But I do think that there are, powers and principalities that have free will, and they are happy to deceive you.
So I can't not write that off. So that's part of my problem right now. I think that's a possibility. I think that, in fact, I know that even in what I would consider my most divine experience, the closest to God I've ever felt, those sorts of experiences, I have to rely on my interpretation of them. And I cannot, in certain situations, I cannot convince myself 100% that I know this is the truth. It's still a matter of interpretation. It still seems foggy, and I don't feel super convicted about certain things. So I play around with the ideas, but I'm not convicted like I am of other ideas, like the oneness and things like that. I'm super convicted on. So I can't rely on my own, fully rely on my own interpretation, which is part of what the Orthodox tradition values so much. It's like, of course you can't you're only one man. Yeah. But we have the church fathers. Yeah. We have 2,000 years of
apostolic succession,
of the most devoted and intellectual motherfuckers who have done this work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm torn, man. I'm torn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these theological, these issues of the spirit, it's not like weighing something or measuring something, it's more complicated than that.
Yes, I would say my biggest critique of the ortho bros, which I know you didn't like that phrase, but
I don't really care. I'm happy to say it, but people say it online a lot of the time, like kind of like a slur.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, my biggest critique of those people is when they put so much faith in the tradition, like all the answers are already preordained for them, that they don't feel any need to seek God, to really seek that experience with God. It's like if all the answers are there and they're being spoon fed to you, you're not doing the spiritual work. And I think about like Carl Jung when I was doing those Red Book episodes and talking about how Carl Jung, went through these mystical exercises of basically daydreaming and going through these, figures and actions that were laying themselves out in his imagination, that he was really doing work, like hard work. The way he described it is he was going into his soul and trying to make it fertile. And I think there's some sort of real effort that needs to be a part of religious practice.
So
go ahead.
I don't think that having all these traditions laid out for you means that you're not doing that work. You know what I mean? Like, I think to use, you just had the Is Jesus a Shaman episode.
Yeah.
So if you imagine going to a shaman might tell you what to do, how to go about, thinking these things. Just because he's telling you what to expect and what you need to do to get to that place doesn't mean that you're not still doing the work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do think that there is some way in which you can say that priests or even Jesus is a shaman. But the way that I would tend to frame that is that shamans are a corruption of the original priests, Melchizedek even, do you know who Melchizedek is?
Yeah. Melchizedek is the in the line of Aaron, in the priestly class.
He's related to that, but he's not actually part of that. He's way before.
Yeah, way before. Yeah.
He was a priest that I think it's in the book of Hebrews. They reference that Jesus is a priest in the order of Melchizedek. And Melchizedek is a person who he was a king, and Abraham offered a tithe to him. So Abraham's like the father of the religion, So right. If Abraham is offering a tithe to this guy, he's something, there's something going on there. And that he didn't have a beginning or an end. Not to say that he was like a god or like maybe an early manifestation of Jesus in the flesh, which some people say. But basically they're saying we don't know. The historical record doesn't have anything to say about his beginning or his end. So for all intents and purposes, he doesn't have a beginning or an end. So
sounds like a cool plot for a movie, man.
Yeah.
I was listening to a thing this morning, and they were saying that in the Greek, the phrase "Son of God" that appears in the New Testament. Now, I'm not talking about the Book of Job or Genesis, sons of God. I'm talking about in the later part of the Bible when it talks about when Jesus is talked about as the Son of God. That in the Greek, it isn't the Son of God; it's a Son of God. It's true. I just heard that. True. That's another check in the box of kind of my argument.
I just have a hard time believing that all of these theologians who speak Greek and ancient Greek and all of that stuff, that they missed that the entire time. That seems.
It was Alan Watts. It was Alan Watts who said it.
Yeah.
But fair enough. But don't you think that those people have a vested interest in continuing.
No.
Because to say that Jesus is a son of God or the son of God is a pretty big fucking difference.
Yeah,
right?
But don't you think that Alan Watts has a pretty vested interest in passing things off the way that he sees them?
Yeah, sure.
And I also think that these priests, they are held to a standard. They don't want to disappoint they don't want to turn over the apple cart for no, whereas Alan Watts, I think, does. He's like, I'm just going to make this little tweak to make it like the way that I want it to be, you know? So
it's funny you say that because I feel like I do the same thing Alan Watts does. I feel like I have the same style of interpretation of the Bible as Alan Watts does.
Yeah.
And it comes from the same place, seemingly.
Yeah.
I listened to Alan Watts this morning, and it was just a audio on YouTube, and it was like the background was just like beautiful nature pictures, right? And I'm sitting there on the couch listening to Alan Watts speak in his beautiful, Alan Watts way.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me that it was Sunday.
You're like, I'm at church.
I just got this feeling like I was listening to a sermon at church. This is Alan Watts is my preacher.
Friar Watts.
Friar Watts. Okay, so before I forget, I wanted to start talking about shape-shifting Jesus, which I want to talk more about. But I want to get back to this idea of angels and demons for a second. This idea.
The Tom Hanks movie?
The Tom Hanks book. So I was talking to my wife about this, and I put it in, I think a little bit in my last solo episode. So maybe this is going to sound familiar to you, but I'm trying to struggling with this idea of angels and demons. And you know why? Because my conception of God is
it's all God, man.
It's all God, man. I don't have a lot of room. I call myself a radical monotheist. That's a good description. And that doesn't leave room for angels and demons. However, I'm a big fan of Carl Jung. And when Carl Jung talks about archetypes, he calls them spirits. And there's something about this that I appreciate. Something about this I have a hard time writing off. And he said that archetypes, they're motivational forces that exist in human beings, in our mind, psyche. And they have a will of their own. They want what they want. So we have to imagine our mind is filled with spirits that we inherited, that we were born with, that are in there. And they want what they fucking want. And that might not be what I want. It's like the ego is one of many spirits floating around in my brain, in my psyche. Mm-hmm. And so I got to thinking about these people, these neuroscientists that talk about the brain, and they say we have a reptilian brain. You've heard this phrase, right? Mm-hmm. It's like it's the amygdala.
It's the one that's deep,
deep down. And then we have the mammalian brain, and that's some other thing. And so as the brain develops, it kind of builds on itself, but it builds on, so it keeps the old pieces. So back if you believe this sort of thing, which you may not any longer, if you believe that once upon a time the only life on Earth was the reptiles, and plants and algae and shit, if the height of development was fucking dinosaurs at one point, their brains were like instinctual brains. And then what the amygdala does is it controls all those things that are unconscious. And I describe it like cause and effect. If you see a female, you pounce on her. That's cause and effect. If you see food, you eat it, cause and effect. You see it, you do it. You see it, you do it. And it's all about survival. The amygdala is all about survival. It does the shit that needs to happen, regulate your temperature, make sure you're eating and fucking. That's what it does. And then after a while, we start developing beyond that, and we have different components of our brain that get added on. And so the amygdala, the reptilian brain, is still in there in us. And every time I see a sexy woman and the thoughts turn south on me, that's just the reptilian brain trying to procreate. Anytime I see like a man looking at my wife and I peacock out and I want to destroy that person because that's mine, that's one of those reptilian things. Fighting over food, fighting over resources, all these things that we would call evil, that we might say a spirit is causing this, like a demon is pulling us into this way of thinking, pulling us away from the light. This is just a kind of a evolutionary biological way of trying to understand how angels and demons might exist within me, because I believe all is one. If it exists, it has to exist within me. That's just my own, rule that I'm imposing on this. But also, an angel is clearly not identical to me. And when Carl Jung talks about the archetypes having a will of their own and an existence independent of mine, then what that picture is in my head is like these spirits that exist that are associated with different functions in my brain, that are independent of me, that are in trying to influence me, in some cases for the good, in some cases for the bad. How is that not angels and demons? How, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
I think that in terms of finding an interpretation that like works for your model, I think that it's perfectly fine. I mean, I tend to just kind of believe it like it's stated in the Christian tradition, that they are beings, differentiated from us, that were created by God, that have wills of their own.
This is another interesting thing about it, is the idea that angels came first, right? Angels were created and then man was created. And I think about the spirits, the reptilian, the spirit associated with the reptilian brain, the spirit associated with whatever it might be. That thing in evolutionary terms came before us. Just like the Bible, the myths tell us the angels were made first.
Yeah.
So there's like these like concordances there that make me kind of like it. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. I think that it's it's very in line with, like the Carl Jung, the Jordan Peterson kind of interpretation of these kind of things. Whereas anymore, I tend to just kind of take like a more of a literal interpretation of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's more fun.
Yeah.
That's not why I do it. But I do think it's more fun.
It is to imagine a world imbued by spirits and this spiritual battle going on behind the scenes at all times and within you at all times. It's a very interesting model.
Feels like Lord of the Rings, man.
Yeah.
It feels like we're in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
So you brought up Prelest earlier, and I got to say, John absolutely killed me with that line about
Prelest.
Oh, dude, I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
So for those people who didn't hear it,
go listen to it.
Go listen to it. It's been downloaded almost 1,000 times, which is awesome.
Man. Like twice as much as our most. Our previous most downloaded episode.
So the where's he from? He's from Eastern Europe somewhere.
Albania.
Yeah. So John from Albania is telling Kyle on the podcast that in the movie Lord of the Rings, when it was released in Russia, Gollum didn't say "my precious." He said "my Prelest."
Yeah.
That is fucking amazing.
It's pretty cool.
Because that what that says is that idea is so firmly fixed in the culture there that people, religious or not, understand what it means and connect it to the story of Gollum, where I can't.
Yeah.
First time I heard the word Prelest was when I was reading Friar Rose's book.
Yeah. Good old Friar Rose. Yeah. That is very cool.
And sorry, Prelest just means like a false, like acceptance of a false spiritual influence. That's kind of how I've understood it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Interesting.
It's funny. My friend Chelsea was listening to the podcast, and she said that his accent was scary, that he sounded like Dracula. I was like, that's pretty funny.
No, I didn't notice too much. But I am excited about getting those guys on to talk about it. I'm curious how they will handle me in that situation.
Yeah.
Are they going to be wanting to tell me something, or are they going to want to hear me out, or how is it going to go?
Well, they're definitely going to want to defend their faith. I mean, expect that.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're, like I said, they're very, I don't know that I want to say open-minded, but open to discussion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it'll be fruitful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that them sharing that episode on those Orthodox Discord servers helped a lot.
Oh yeah.
But I've been looking at the analytics on that YouTube Studio thing, and a lot of it seems like it's coming from a lot of the traffic seems like it's coming from like YouTube recommendations, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I have been tagging the episodes. Like when you upload them, you can put a bunch of tags in, and I've been tagging the shit out of all of the ones I do.
Yeah, it's not really clear to me how that's supposed to work. So what I've been doing is I've been putting in keywords separated by semicolons, and I don't know if that's right or wrong. Like, does somebody have to type in the word and the semicolon? So yeah, I wish it was more clear how you're supposed to do that.
So I think you just like type whatever, comma, whatever, comma, whatever, comma.
Yeah.
And that, you know, when people are doing searches, if it pings any of those tags that you've put in, it'll show up in their search or in their like recommendations, you know, if they watch a lot of things that have to do with, you know, Orthodox Christianity, yada, yada, yada.
Before we leave the topic of Orthodox Christianity, one of the things you asked the guys that I don't think was answered really well, that I'm very curious about. You remember when you said that when you encounter Orthodoxy, it was always in circles that you would call based. It was always in conservative circles from a conservative perspective. But you hear from other people that Orthodoxy is notoriously liberal as a religion, accepting, you know, liberal social things.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in that. Is there truth in that?
So in that episode, it seemed like they were pushing back on it a little bit. And I appreciate that. I think that might not reflect their experience in an Orthodox church, but it's hard to base the whole of something on your experience. And I think that the points that Corey and Woe made in their episode, that it's a lot of immigrants and immigrants overwhelmingly vote Democrat. I think that there's something to that.
Yeah.
But the point that they made that I think does hold up 100% is that the opinions of, even if it's a lot of people in the church, even if a bunch of people in the church hold this opinion, that doesn't really reflect on the actual theology of the church, you know?
Right.
So there's something to that.
There's something to that. Although if enough people in the church feel that way, if you look at what's happened to the Catholic faith, the fucking Pope just starts moving that way.
Yeah.
It's just like, all right, I guess this is a populist religion now. We're going to do whatever the people want. However, I find it completely unimaginable that Orthodox Christians, based on my limited experience of Orthodoxy and having gone to an Orthodox church on one occasion, I have a really difficult time thinking they would support gay marriage or abortion or any of these sort of things that are liberal, like hot topics for Democrats.
Agreed. Which is funny because in my experience with Protestant churches, I kind of feel the same way. Like a lot of the Protestant people that I grew up with, it's like they're not supporting gay marriage, you know. But you look at the stats and, you know, there's a whole bunch of that kind of stuff creeping in.
I think there's like I don't know how to put this exactly, but I think it's like it has to do with compassion. It has to do with being Christ-like and taking that to mean strictly Jesus's compassion. So turning the other cheek, washing the feet of his apostles, these examples of things he did that were, extremely compassionate, feeding people, all the communist Jesus stuff you hear about. I think that stuff gets latched onto from liberals, and they're like, we're just going to feed the poor, and and if you want to kill your children in utero, that's fine.
Yeah.
To
be fair, there's like a balance that needs to be met, because I feel like a lot of the more conservative side of Christianity, a lot of those people kind of completely reject. I don't want to say they reject those kind of things, but they don't concentrate on that sort of thing enough. You know, like for them, it's very me relationship, and that's between me and Jesus.
Right.
And I don't need to be washing people's feet.
Yeah.
And I think that we do.
Yeah. So some of that sounds like the stuff I was saying about having a personal experience of God.
Yeah.
But I see your point too. I'm conflicted in a lot of ways, man. But I'm still learning, man. I consider myself a student.
Same. So one of the things that I think has helped drive up traffic on that thing is I moderated a debate on the Crucible. And you said that you had something related to Andrew that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So let's get to that because I'm curious.
Oh yeah. I wish I could find it so I could play it. So I saw Andrew pop up on something recommended for me, but it wasn't the Crucible.
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, all right. So I put it on, and it is a panel conversation with probably like 10 people up on a panel. Andrew's one of them. And
can you remember who any of the other people were?
No, but you might know this when I start describing. You tell me if you know this. On one side of the audience, or one side of the panel rather, is a bunch of beefcakes, a bunch of big old brawny, just ripped dudes. And then on the right hand side was just mostly a couple of regular dudes. Andrew was one of the regular dudes, and there's this guy, bald, beard, designer clothes, ripped as shit, and they were talking about what it means to be a man.
Oh yeah, okay, I know exactly what you're.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. All right, so this guy is talking about how the point he's making is
that guy's name is Wes Watson.
Okay,
yeah.
The point he seems to be making is that what it means to be a man is to put 100% effort into everything, to be a Renaissance man, to be good at everything, to take care of your body, to take care of your mind, to be successful in your career, that what it means to be a man is to be Jesus Christ, basically, with shredded abs and in a big old like bank account.
Yeah.
And Andrew disagreed with him. And what ensued was the funniest shit. And it made me like Andrew so much more. I didn't have a lot to base it on, other than a little bit of a confrontational Andrew during the debates, which we've already talked about. Sometimes it rubs me the wrong way. It's just like, you're being mean just to be mean at this point. But he had to kind of do that to this Brutus the Barber Beefcake fella, and he reminded me. I'm sure my brother's going to listen to this, and I don't want him to take offense, but it reminded me of my brother. This guy.
Wes Watson did, yeah.
Because what he did was try to make some points enthusiastically, which is a lot like my brother would do, get the audience on his side, which they were for a minute.
Yeah.
And then the moment Andrew starts chipping away at his ideas, he gets louder and starts ad hominem him. He just starts going after Andrew as a person.
Grown man don't have tits.
Exactly.
Shave your arms.
Shave your arm. And then Andrew's like, shave my arms? What kind of man shaves his arms? But yeah, like you could tell that guy, in order to make his point and win the argument, he would have body slammed Andrew.
Yeah.
And Andrew's like, well, you could try it, but it's not a great idea to do with someone carrying a gun,
Yeah.
And I just thought it was good, man. It made me see him in a different light. It made me see him not as a bully, because he was the one being bullied in that situation. Yeah. So I couldn't see him as a bully. And I just wanted to share that with you, man.
That's funny. I don't know that I was expecting that to be what it was, although I should have, because that clip has fucking blown up.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't know. I think I was expecting it to be like one of the panels that Andrew has done with like red pill people, where they talk about like divorce or something like that, But yeah, I get it. It makes perfect sense. That was what it was. Yeah. That whole clip was embarrassing. That guy, Wes Watson.
It was, yeah.
I mean, he basically just got like, not physically owned, but like, he like didn't have any, and that's the thing with a lot of the debates that Andrew gets into. These people will come into the debate and they don't have any points to make. It's all feelings. It's all, this is what I think, but no reasons for why they think that. Yep. No arguments for why you should think that. This guy, Wes Watson, was like the epitome of that. Like he had nothing. It was basically, this is what I do. Yeah. This is what you should do too. Yeah. If you want to be like me, shave your head, shave your arms. Yeah, it was just super embarrassing.
He kept asking him how much money he had in his bank account, and like it was so petty. And like I said, as soon as he couldn't immediately get everyone to agree with him, he turns to the audience and tries to get the audience in on him. And it just reminds me of being a kid on the playground where a fight is getting ready to break out. And that's the kind of tactic that I would see from people. It's just like, get the audience involved.
Sometimes that works.
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes the person who's doing it has got a lot of charisma and they can get the audience on their side. Unfortunately for Wes, Andrew's, A, smart as fuck, and B, has a bunch of charisma himself, so the crowd was not so easily swayed. Like a few of the times when that guy appealed to the crowd, like one time he was like, be honest, would any of you guys be friends with these fucking guys? And a bunch of people in the audience were like, yeah, we would, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that just did not go his way at all.
Well, let me ask you the question. Who would want to be friends with that fucking guy? I don't want to be friends with, I don't want to go to the club with that guy. I don't want to be around that guy.
Yeah, apparently.
He seems unstable, man.
Yeah, for sure. Apparently he's like a bullshit artist. Like it's like all a scheme, like basically some kind of like pyramid scheme. He has people paying him like insane amounts of money so that they can go, they can go on like Zoom calls with him and he'll like yell at them basically.
Oh, Jesus.
And like they get people to do the same thing, So yeah, that guy's, it's like, what am I trying to say here? It's like disappointing that somebody like that can find as much success as he has, like who is buying into that,
I would love to hear him and Jordan Peterson have a conversation.
Wes Watson and Jordan Peterson?
because they're both ostensibly doing the same thing. They're both trying to show young men how to be a man, but they have very different opinions about it,
Yeah.
Jordan would demolish that fucking guy. But
I would love to see an actual like debate or conversation between Andrew and that guy. Like let them play that out a little bit more, because Andrew made that guy look like an idiot there. But if there was like a moderated debate where someone was holding Wes's feet to the fire and forcing him to answer questions, I mean, it's never going to happen because he's dumb as a box of rocks and he knows that, So
you put him in that one-on-one situation while Andrew has a pack of cigarettes to smoke. Oh man, it's not going to go well.
Not going to go well at all, for sure.
So I do appreciate Andrew a lot more after that. It was just I needed to see that for some reason.
Yeah.
It's
crazy, man, because Andrew's like my favorite dude on the internet.
Yeah.
I fucking love Andrew.
Yeah. I think it's cool as hell that you built a relationship with him and that you've been moderating those debates. That's cool, man.
Yeah, man. It's a lot of fun. Hopefully I continue to get better at moderating. That debate that I did recently between Jacob Winograd and Andrew was it was an easy one to debate. Because everyone talks about Andrew like he's this big fucking meanie head, and he can be aggressive, but I like that about him. But I feel like that debate with Jacob like highlights the fact that Andrew's he's gonna meet you at your level. If you come at him very aggressive and in bad faith, he'll fucking take the gloves off. But that guy Jacob was very respectful. There was not a whole lot of talking over each other going on. Some lady who was friends with with Jacob, was like talking shit to me that I did a bad job because she said Andrew talked over Jacob the whole time, which I don't really agree. In my opinion, it's not my job to insert myself needlessly into the debate as the moderator.
Yep.
It's like the show is not about me. All I'm there to do is keep time, and if necessary, like facilitate the conversation going smoothly.
Keep it going. Yeah. Keep the conversation going.
And I just don't really, the one thing I will say is like, maybe I could have tried to move it on from, they were talking about, like the intersection of libertarianism and Christianity. And maybe I could have been like, all right, we've been talking about this for a while. Do you guys want to move on to the marriage thing that you wanted to talk about? But that's like basically really the only criticism I would have for myself on that one. Like that was a very easy debate to moderate.
How many have you done now?
3.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I felt good about the first one I did. The second one is like the worst one I've done.
Yeah.
I did not feel great about that one. The guy Jeem, I feel like I could have moderated in his in his favor more. Like I could have prevented Adam Green from talking over him a little bit. But then this one, like I said, it was just super easy. You know, I didn't have to do a lot. I was just keeping time, basically.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shape-shifting Jesus.
Okay.
I don't want to go over that one too quickly. So the way this one came up is I was reading ancientorigins.net
As you're
feed.
wont to do.
I love it. I love it. That one's got so many interesting little tidbits. And this one came up about this document. This document that was found. Oh, by the way, when you were talking to the Orthodox dudes, they brought up the Didache. Do you know that document? I literally that morning was watching something about it. I'd never heard of it, and I thought that was pretty interesting that he brings it up in the conversation, especially because you have a first century document that settles the question that. Is it the Lutherans that have the debate about sprinkling versus submersion, or is it? There's one denomination that split off for that reason.
Yeah,
I can't remember which.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
And the Didache in the first century talks about it. If you're going to do a baptism, do it in living water. That means do it in moving water.
Yeah. If
you can't do it in moving water, you can do it in still water. If you don't have still water, you can sprinkle.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's fine. Either way is fine.
Yeah, that seems like kind of like maybe like a Baptist thing.
Yeah.
You're like that seems like something maybe they would be more picky about. Like you can't sprinkle, you need to actually submerge.
Yeah.
I think like I know that when an adult is baptized in the Eastern Orthodox Church, it's submersion. It's 1, 2, 3.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
And I'm pretty sure they do it with babies too. It's like they'll take babies 1, 2, 3.
Wow.
Whereas in the Catholic Church, they'll sprinkle.
Yeah.
For a baby.
Yeah, but in the Catholic Church, they call that a confirmation. They don't call it a baptism, right? So it's different.
I don't know.
You're being dedicated to God, which is something your parents are doing on your behalf, but you can't be baptized till you're of the age where you understand what it means.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually do it like around 12 or something like that. In any case, shape-shifting Jesus. So I come across this ancient document that was discovered, and they're talking about how it's talking about Jesus as a shapeshifter, that he was not seen the same way to various people, that he couldn't be identified by his appearance. And this is why Judas had to kiss him, because you couldn't describe Jesus and send the cops after you because he could shift his shape. You couldn't tell who was Jesus by how he looked. Now, first of all, that's really interesting to me. But as soon as I read it, this in the back of my head, I was like, wait a minute. There's something about that rings a bell. Like there's some scripture that I remember about Jesus after the resurrection coming to Mary Magdalene and Mary Magdalene not recognizing him.
Yeah, there's a few of them too. Like you might have talked about this at one point. He like meets them on the road.
Yep.
And
the road to Emmaus. Yep, I talked about all that shit because
Yeah.
Afterwards I was researching for the podcast. There are not only in the Bible but in Origin, and this was Saint Cleo or something that I can't remember now. It's foggy, but then in the biblical sources, and some of them concur that Judas's kissing of Jesus to identify him was because Jesus was a shapeshifter. That doesn't come from one place; it comes from multiple sources.
Yeah.
And then there's all these stories in the Bible about after the resurrection, about Jesus appearing to people and them not recognizing him. Even one where he was breaking bread with the apostles, and in the scripture says that the apostles didn't dare ask who it was because they knew it was Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of shit is that? So first of all, what do you make of that, man?
I mean, it's just like, it's not that mind-boggling to me because Jesus also did a bunch of things like bring people back from the dead and turn water into wine and walk on water. It's like, so the fact that he like can be like Mystique in the X-Men and like make himself look like different people, it doesn't seem like that crazy to me. You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
Now, in terms of how it is laid out in the story, you kind of have to I don't know. I want to say like make some assumptions, or like read things into it to come to that conclusion.
Yep.
I don't know what, like, I don't know what the significance of that is, because if you told me, if I die and I find out, yes, Jesus definitely was a shapeshifter, I wouldn't, my mind wouldn't be blown by that because of all the miraculous nature of his existence in general. But yeah, I don't think it's like really significant to the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's interesting. I mean, that perspective is interesting. I guess the reason why it struck me is because I didn't really notice it before.
Sure.
Until this.
Yeah.
I didn't really notice it. And then once you read it, you're like, oh, it's pretty obvious. It's not just Matthew. It's Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and Origen, and some of these early church fathers. Like, fuck.
Yeah.
But you're right. If he can turn water into wine and raise Lazarus from the dead and all kinds and take a couple of loaves and fishes and feed a bunch of people, shifting shape is just par for the course.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting for me for a couple of reasons. The idea that Jesus could be different people is some kind of support for my idea that Jesus is not the only God man. That right? If I can encounter Jesus and it be Steve, and you can encounter Jesus and it's, some other dude that's not Steve, right? In some ways, there's more than one Jesus. In some ways, you're encountering Jesus with a different body and a different face. It's like Jesus is more than one person. And I'm fishing a little bit, but I'm just saying there's something.
I can't like go on that one with you, because like, even if he can change, like, let's just use the Mystique example.
Yeah.
Mystique is always Mystique, like I think about they've made it into a meme, but in the one with Fassbender, where he plays Magneto, he's like, show me what you really look like. And she, morphs into what, she looks like as a human. And he's like, no, I mean what you really look like. And she goes into the, the weird blue looking demon creature. It's always, regardless of what she looks like, it's always Mystique, So if Jesus is, it's not like he became a different person. He's still Jesus.
True. But let me give you a different spin on that. You ever see the movie Fallen?
I don't know.
It's Denzel Washington from the 90s.
I don't think I have.
I want to say John Goodman is in it, but I might be wrong. But the idea is that that Denzel Washington encounters a demon. He doesn't know it's a demon because it's in the body of a person who's like a murderer. And when he puts the murderer, if he gets the murderer behind bars, they send him to death row. He gets electrocuted, and Denzel's there waiting, seeing him die. But when he dies, the demon that's in him just goes to the guard who pulled the switch.
Oh.
And then so Denzel's after the murderer, but every time somebody who's possessed by the demon touches somebody, it can go into the other person. So you never know where the demon is. The murderer is possessing everybody, and within seconds, even if you know where he is, within seconds you have no idea. He's jumping from person to person to person. Imagine Jesus jumping from person to person to person.
I mean, I see what
it would be Jesus. It would be the Jesus, but it would be jumping from person to person. This is total speculation. I'm just saying it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, but like I feel like there's more evidence to support the fact that Jesus may have been able to shapeshift than there is that Jesus was like possessing people.
Sure, 100%.
Yeah.
So going back to your point about what's significant about it, it's like, yeah, it's cool. It's one of many miracles, but why does that even matter in the grand scheme of things? It's not even one of the cool miracles.
That's pretty cool.
Well, the wall of Therianthropes this is the idea that I brought to the table.
No one can see it, but
yes,
yeah.
The wall of Therianthropes. So the idea here is that when we go back to the oldest evidence of religion, we find images of shapeshifters. And there's something about the experience, the spiritual experience, that involves transformation. So, just from like psychedelic experience, when you're under the influence of that, everything transforms. It's like it's like the world almost becomes transformation. Shapes changing, colors changing, everything shifting, transforming. And when you look at like ancient accounts of holy men, they seem to have this ability of changing their shape. And it's not always like, the story is not always some sort of literal thing, like a shaman is turning into a fox and running through the forest. Although that does happen. It does happen. You see that sort of thing in Native American mythology and some other places. But usually it's in the midst of a spiritual experience, whether that's like a involving some kind of ritual or some psychedelic, psychoactive drugs or whatever it is, blowing smoke and doing the rituals or whatever, that those shaman will go into a state. They go into a state where they are in the spiritual realm. They're no longer here. And when they're in that spiritual realm, they transform. They become animals. They transform from animal to human. They transform into spirits and gods. They transform into the whole cosmos. Then they come back and they bring wisdom back from those experiences, and that's what we call revelation or prophecy. That is the historical model, and it's also more sophisticated in modern religions and so forth. But that historically is how it's been. And then you go back and you look at these cave paintings that are 40,000 years old, from Chauvet in France, from Les Trois Frères, from Altamira, from all these in Spain, all these different cave paintings, and they're up on the wall for people who can't see them. Even this mask here is made from a deer skull with holes drilled in it, and you can see how similar somebody wearing that mask with antlers and holes for their eyes, where the skull cap comes down. It looks just like this cave painting in red that you see down below, where this person is half buffalo or whatever, half man. So this is something that is at the heart of historical religion. It is the shamanic experience to go into the spiritual realm where you become more than a man. And when they depict it, what makes you more than a man, what makes you divine, when it's depicted, is this blending of your human characteristics with animal features or features of nature. And I think that's interesting because the classical world is filled with gods that are like that. Horus from ancient Egypt with the head of a hawk, or Sekhmet with the head of a feline, or Ganesha from Hinduism with the head of an elephant, or Anubis, or in Egypt, or Thoth. I have Thoth up there with the head of an ibis. And that all of the and here Ceranos up at the top. This is an ancient Celtic god with antlers. All of these ancient deities seem to fit this pattern of this shape-shifting shaman. And if shape-shifting is associated with an experience of a spiritual experience, or an experience of being at one with God, and the fact that Jesus was a shapeshifter, I think that's fucking cool, man.
That's pretty cool.
It says something about Jesus as a spiritual person. It connects Jesus with this lineage of shaman that go back to the beginning of human history, prehistory even.
Yeah. So I said that I think that shamans are like these kind of non-Christian shaman, early human religion.
Yeah.
I don't think there is any earlier religion than Christianity. And I think that all of them that like academics and things would say predate Christianity, they don't predate Christianity. They're corruptions of, the truth at the beginning of time. And I think that kind of idea still holds up in that. I don't think that if Jesus was a shapeshifter, I don't think that changes the message of the Bible at all.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah. So I guess that's where I'm coming. That's where I'm coming from on it. Is it cool? Yeah, it's absolutely cool.
Do you think that it like intent? How like Jesus was supposed to be from the bloodline of Aaron on the priestly side, but also from the bloodline of
he wasn't from the
David, right?
Aaron. Yeah,
I think he was supposed to be from both. I thought.
No. So that's the whole thing with that fella Melchizedek. To be a priest, you had to be of the tribe of Aaron. You had to be a Levite, and Jesus was not. He was, I believe, the tribe of Judah. And so people were like, well, he can't be a priest. They were saying he's the priest. He's like the most important priest.
Yeah.
And there, a lot of the Israelites, the Hebrews back in the day were, he's like, he can't be. He's not of the tribe of Aaron.
Yeah.
And they were saying that's what that's all about. He's a priest in the order of Melchizedek.
Okay. So when Jesus says, I'm from the bloodline of David, right? That's what allows him to be a king, or what gives him what's the word I'm looking for? It gives him the standing to be a king. I think there's something about Jesus being a shaman that gives him the same kind of authenticity as being from the line of David. It's like, you're from the line of shaman that go back. Like, there's something about that I think gives him like a lineage, gives him there's a word I'm searching for that I can't find. Shit, I'm doing the Jordan Peterson fingers.
Yeah, you are.
I'm trying to think. But anyway, I can't think of it. But I just think there's something cool that about the idea of Jesus as a shapeshifter that connects him to the holy men from the beginning of time, like a lineage of holy men from the beginning of time, all the way up to the time of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think that that's interesting, but I just think that like there's like an inversion, like you're saying that these shamans existed first and that Jesus came later and is like, he is in the line of those spiritual,
not as a Messiah, but as a holy man, as a priest. So I think priests used to be called shaman. I don't think there's a difference. So when you say that it's like a bastardization, that to call Jesus a shaman is like a bastardization or something like that.
I think that shamans are a bastardization of the original priest.
Yeah, but what makes you think that? What makes you say that?
I mean, I think that Adam was the first priest. In terms of like human beings,
Mhm.
Adam, he was the leader of his family. He was the priest of his family. And
what does a priest do that a leader of a family doesn't do? What makes a priest a priest?
Well, in terms of like a congregation, like I guess a priest is administering the sacraments. And I don't think that, a husband and father is technically going to be doing that.
Okay.
I think that if a husband and father is doing that, that's like actually kind of sacrilegious. But in a lot of ways, the husband and father is a priest in the sense that he is like the spiritual guide of the family.
Good.
If the children or the wife, mother have issues, they go to the head.
Yeah. See, I would say that there's really not a better description of a shaman than a spiritual guide.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is I think that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But I think that like what these shamans, they were missing something. They were not guiding people to the truth of Christianity. That's what I mean by it being a bastardization.
So I think that these people were searching for something. I think I'm searching for something. I think of myself as in the same vein as these shaman.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% convinced that like I like to throw myself in the same category as Jesus, and not just myself. I mean everybody. I like to throw everybody in the same category. Like, and there's some evidence for this. Like, I don't. This might not be biblical. I'm talking out of my ass, but I think it is about how every human being is considered a priest.
That's a Protestant idea.
It is a Protestant idea. Okay.
I mean, there may be some kind of equivalent in Eastern Orthodoxy and Catholicism, but the priesthood of all believers is definitely like, I mean, it's a Lutheran thing for sure. So
the priesthood of believers. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Do you think that Adam, and this might not be the right way to ask the question, if you think that Adam was the first priest, and a priest is somebody who administers sacraments, do you think that Holy Communion existed before the time of Jesus?
I don't think so. No, I think that it's kind of a thing. We've been talking about the priest in the order of Melchizedek and Jesus being like a new type of priest. I think that Jesus kind of created that sacrament in the Last Supper. That was, the initiation of that ritual. I'm not sure that it existed in any form before then.
How do you take the idea of communion being Passover? Because if communion was Passover, then it's that sacrament is far older even than the first century. It's far older even than Jesus. If the communion is identical to what's the word I just used? Passover, yeah. Pesach.
Yeah, I don't really know a whole lot. I mean, I know that it comes from Egypt and the passing over of the houses that had the blood on the door. But I don't. I guess like the judgment, the final judgment will pass over the people who have the blood of Christ. I get, maybe that's, but I don't.
That's a fair analogy for sure.
But I don't know, man.
But you do think that there was some sacrament, like even when I think about ancient religions, I think about sacrifice. I think about some kind of sacrifice, whether that be animal sacrifice or first fruit offerings or something like that. They go back to ancient times.
Yeah.
So there would have been, I think, there would have been some kind of sacrament that priests would have been doing even in the early days, even in the Stone Age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that. I don't know. I think that the Passover thing was more. It was a sacrifice. You were sacrificing, like you were talking the animal or whatever, and you were using the blood to. It was like a symbolic thing, And a lot of Protestants believe that it is still a symbolic thing. Not all Protestants. The church I go to, Lutherans, they don't believe. They believe that it is the Eucharist. They believe that it is transformed,
the body and the blood.
Not in the same way that Catholics and Orthodox do. And this is like one of the things that like confuses me. Like in Orthodoxy and Catholicism, they call it transubstantiation. And in Lutheranism, it's called consubstantiation. I don't really know what the difference is.
Yeah.
I've read into it and I still don't really understand like how it's different,
Yeah. The only thing that comes to my head is that con usually means with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the spirit, it's like the essence of the body and blood is with the symbols, where the Catholics believe it's literally transformed.
Yeah. I just don't. What I mean is, I don't know what the significant difference between those two things is.
Me either.
But I'm not going to say there is none. But
the cool thing about blood that I've learned.
The cool thing about blood
is that, first of all, that the Jews were told by God that they weren't supposed to eat blood. This is why that you drain the blood. This is why kosher butchery is important. You drain the blood out of the animal in a certain way, because you're not supposed to drink blood. And the reason for that is that if you go back to ancient sacrifices, animals were sacrificed, and the blood was the important part of the sacrifice, is the thing that represents life. And that's the part you pour out and you offer to the gods. So only the gods, blood is a food for the gods. That's why it's forbidden for a human to eat it, because blood isn't for us. It's for God. Isn't that interesting?
That's interesting.
Man.
Yeah, man. Food of the gods. No more bloodwurst sausage for you.
What else you got, man? I got two other things I want to talk to you about.
Well, let's tackle them.
All right. So sometimes I have ideas and I just, if I remember, I write them down because I want to talk to you about them, but they're like disjointed. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But you know how right now in this whole woke culture that we're living in, we're seeing things like statues being torn down of the founding fathers, important historical people, and this revisionist history thing that's going on in the name of equity and equality and whatever it is that they're saying. So we're living in this world. And a lot of companies, a lot of corporations are going gung-ho on the woke thing. And for some companies, it seems to be working fine. For others, like Bud Light, not so much. But Disney, Disney's one of these companies that's overtly super duper duper woke. You know, they're putting trans characters in Star Wars movies, and they're just doing whatever they possibly can. I just had this idea. Walt Disney. What do we know about Walt Disney as a historical fact? What do we know about Walt Disney? If you know nothing else, what do you know about him?
That he drew Mickey Mouse.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I think that a lot of people probably don't know much about Mickey Mouse, or they probably don't know much about Walt Disney. You know?
Yeah. I don't either.
Being a person who is, you know, into these kind of cultural things, I probably know more about Walt Disney than most people, and I know that he was he would not be down with this shit. You know, like he would be like he's rolling over in his grave about the shit that Disney's doing.
For sure.
I know that he was, you know, a bit of an didn't like the Jays. We'll put it that way.
Yep. That's really what I wanted to get to. But go ahead if you have anything else.
No, that's about it. You know, just like all of those things, like he wouldn't be down with all of this shit that they're doing.
Yeah. So Walt, I saw a commercial the other day. It was one of those shows, you know, The Men Who Built America, and they made a whole bunch of those shows. The food that built America, the toys that built America. Well, they have one on there now. It's how Disney built America. Okay, This is a whole show about the cultural icons and, you know, how influential Disney's been in the American culture. And here's my point. Walt Disney was a notorious anti-Semite. Notorious.
I was trying to avoid saying that word.
I know. I figured. Even in his day, when it was far more acceptable, he's known to be a vehement anti-Semite. And I say that because I wonder how much of a defense mechanism Disney's wokeness is as a way of trying to hide having their statues torn down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. For sure.
Because the fucking progressive libs there would be no better statue to tear down. Maybe Adolf Hitler himself, right? You got a choice to make. Do you tear down Adolf Hitler's statue or Walt Disney's statue? There are some progressives that if they knew the facts would be tearing that down.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if their approach to the culture wars is a defense mechanism, it's a bait and switch, trying to avoid getting people hip to.
Well, I think that you're onto something, because I think that a lot of these progressives, they do know that Walt Disney was, you know, notoriously anti-Semitic. They're aware, but it doesn't matter, because the company Disney, the current company Disney is walking in lockstep with the progressive ideology. You know,
right
now if Disney decides our profit margin is being damaged by all of this woke bullshit that we're doing, which it is. And if they decide we're going to veer into making content that is, you know, I'm not even going to say like right-wing friendly. We're going to veer back into making content that is like normative. You know what I'm saying? That then these progressives, they would take the knives out for Walt and his anti-Semitism.
Yeah. It's like they can't even. It's like they don't even have the choice anymore. They have to keep going full steam ahead.
It's like, it kind of makes me think of like Epstein and all of these people who went to his island and potentially did all kinds of terrible things. It's like, well, we've got something on you, so you better keep doing what the fuck we tell you to do. Otherwise, the sex tapes are coming out.
I think there's something to this, man.
Yeah.
There's literally nothing preventing the left from tearing down the history of Disney. And they're a huge corporate target. They could easily do it, and they would be justified as they are with anything else they're doing, but they don't. You know, I just think that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, last one I got for you is, all right, you know how, I don't know if you know this or not, but in like prehistory, like in the early days, anthropologists believe that human beings worshipped a great goddess. That's where you get like all the Venus figurines, like the one I have tattooed on the inside of my arm, and you know, like the Venus of Willendorf from Germany, and all of these images. The idea is that, and there's this lady, her name is Gambutas. I can't remember her first name, but she's a very famous anthropologist, I believe.
Indian?
Yeah, I think
Indian
so.
lady? I just guessed.
Maybe American, maybe like Indian American. I don't know. But the idea here is, I got this book here, Myths of the Goddess. Can you see that? Let me see. Can you see this?
You're like Nectarios and John.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny how many times they're like, look at this book.
Sorry, now I can't get the books back and where they belong. But the point is that in the Stone Age, the belief was that our idea of God was not of a man, but of a great fertile womb of a great goddess. She's Mother Earth. And you have these examples of societies like the Minoans in Crete. Mm-hmm. And if it's strange, man, like if you see the images of the women, first of all, it's a temperate climate there. It's beautiful, but the women wear dresses where their breasts are completely exposed. The dresses start down here. They walk around with their breasts exposed. The imagery is highly. People say that there's no evidence that these people had fortified walls. There's no evidence that there was an army. Mm-hmm. There's no evidence that there was any violence. Mm-hmm. And so they talk about this like great Stone Age time when women ruled and it was a matriarchy and there was no war. And, this is this sort of tale that they tell. And there's some truth to the idea that a great goddess is legitimately an ancient form of religion, that people saw God as the womb, as nature's womb, as the thing that creates, but that's how it creates, like in a sort of a sexual way. And so you have this idea of this abstract goddess who basically is the cosmos, and she's constantly, squeezing out creation. So anyway, I had this idea that this great goddess idea, I'm trying to read my notes here. It's not due, in fact, to any kind of matriarchy that actually existed, where women ran the societies and they were the head of the families and things like that. But instead, it's what the Jungians call an anima projection. So let me explain. So Carl Jung and those sort of depth psychologist people say that the things that we're unconscious of, we project out into the world. And if men ruled the world, which has been the case in modern history, maybe it was the case always. I don't know what you might think about that. It seems likely to me that we were always in charge. But in any case, we don't have, as men, we don't have any connection to our feminine side, or not like an intimate or direct connection to our feminine side. That's what Carl Jung calls the anima. So for the man, all the things about us that might have been the case if we were women and instead of men, we kind of don't attach ourselves to, we bury down, we ignore, whatever it might be. And so those things we project. So the anima is projected out into the world. And I just wonder if this idea of a great goddess doesn't come from a time when women ruled, but rather a time when men were projecting their feminine side and calling that thing the great goddess. What do you think?
I definitely think that is more likely than it being like literally based on a time when women ruled, because like you said, I just don't understand how that's possible. Like when you get down to the brass tacks of existence, it doesn't make sense for women to have ever ruled. For obvious reasons. To anybody who's being honest about reality. Now, I mean, we can have like reverence for women and their roles in society and things like that. But when it comes down, and this is an argument that Andrew makes frequently, is that like when it comes to like rights and the enforcements of rights and defense, that's all men all the time. And if you leave it to women, your society is fucked. So yeah, I think that it being a projection of men's feminine side, I think is more valid than that. But
see, like the thing is, when you,
I want to know what you like, what that feminine side is,
Yeah. Well, it's like, Boy, it's hard to talk about, but I would say, like, the fact that some random, or not, I don't know if you want to call it random, but the fact that there is some selection of XX versus XY chromosome makes a difference between me being a man. I am kind of fluctuation having been a woman instead of a man. And if I were a woman, there's a whole series of things, of experiences that I would have, of capabilities I would have, of chemistry that I would have had that I do not have now and never will understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I could have been a woman just as easily as a man. I could have been something that is part of the mystery that brings new life into the world. I could have felt that in my body. I could have been that, but I'm not. And I see it in someone else, and it's a mystery. And so whenever something is like that, whenever it's mysterious, we attach some kind of sacredness to it when we don't understand it, especially when it's connected to something like the origin of life. Then I connect some kind of mystery to it. It becomes sacred, and that's how an anima projection becomes a deity.
Mm.
It's like something that I know exists. Because it's not a part of me, I experience it somehow in the world. And because I don't understand it, and because it's connected to something so important as the creation of life, I consider it to be sacred.
Yeah.
And I have this abstract sacred thing that's the goddess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how best to explain it, but that's the best I can do.
So in some fantasy world where women were capable of ruling, and history had been matriarchal as opposed to patriarchal, do you think that it may have manifested in the same ways, as opposed to being Mother Earth and all of this stuff, there would have been Father Earth?
I think it would have been an animus projection, and it would have been Father Sky. It would have been Father Heaven, because that's how the Smiths have always kind of laid themselves out. Father Heaven is always the other half of Mother Earth.
So what does that make you think about religions like Christianity being patriarchal from the jump?
Well, it makes me wonder in some ways, like Dan Brown did a good job of laying out in the Da Vinci Code, is what part of the sacred feminine have we ignored in the West in particular? I mean, I guess not in particular, I guess in the world. What part of the sacred feminine, like the imagery and the meaning behind the feminine side of the deity, have we buried, or have we, has the patriarchal story usurped for ourselves? Now, does that matter ultimately? I don't know.
Yeah, that is not the way that I kind of see it. I see, I think that you can chalk this up to the fact that I believe that the Christian story is the truth, like the core truth from the beginning of time, that we are history has been patriarchal because that is the nature of things, because God is the father, God is not the mother. And again, all of these religions, the shaman type people who may have also expressed ideas of the divine mother, that those are just corruptions of the truth. Not to say that there's not some element of the divine mother in Christianity, because there is. The Theotokos is a very real,
Yeah, it's hard to, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I just think that the reason that existence is patriarchal is because existence is patriarchal.
So what do you make of the bit in Genesis when human beings are being created in the image of God? And it says that man was created in the image of God, so male and female he created them. So the image of God is male and female. What do you think of that?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
It's interesting.
Yeah. But I do know that, I mean, it's laid out pretty explicitly in Christianity that, it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and those are explicitly male. You know what I mean?
Well, the Holy Spirit, not so much.
True.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit's got a lot of feminine connotations to it. The Shekinah from the Hebrew, that's sort of like the divine feminine that was attached to the idea of the Holy Spirit. And the Sophia, the Gnostic Sophia, who's the embodiment of wisdom, that is associated with the Holy Spirit as well. So that's interesting. Like there may still yet be a feminine component to the Trinity that we just sort of don't talk about.
I don't know, man. I don't know if it's that we don't talk about it. Because in my mind, saying we don't talk about it almost makes it seem like we're trying to suppress it. And I don't think that that's the truth. Like that, in my mind, that like is like hearkening to like kind of modern like ideas of the patriarchy, man. We're suppressing the idea that the Holy Spirit was a woman, you know?
Right.
And I don't believe that.
Do you think that didn't happen at all historically?
That we are suppressing like female.
Yeah. I never really thought about it, but I've heard it so many times that I just kind of like assumed there's some truth to it, you know?
Well, I mean, like, what are we supposedly suppressing?
Well, it's like if women aren't allowed to be, if they're not allowed to hold positions of authority in politics or in the church, then we have to have some justification for that. You know, it's like, why can't a woman be a priest? We have to have some reason. We have to tell them something. What do we tell them? You know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that if you come at it just from a physical, non-spiritual sense, I mean, the reasons are clear why women can't be leaders. And I mean, I don't think that women should be politicians. I don't think that women certainly should not be pastors. I don't believe that any of that stuff is appropriate.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that really, because I never really thought about it. But if you ask me if I think women should be policemen or infantrymen, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. So I think we should explain for the people listening here what we mean by this stuff about women not being leaders and the matriarchy perhaps being a fantasy. And the idea is something like, and I think this is what Andrew would say as well. The idea is something like, if matriarchy is allowed, if that's the system that's implemented, that system is defended by men, right? So even if we decide the matriarch is going to be the leader and the women are going to be the council, and this is how and when you get married, you take the woman's name, and if this is what we're deciding, we have a matriarchy that stands solely on the muscle and brawn and sacrifice of the men, not the women.
Yeah.
That would be unrealistic if a patriarchal society came into my village, and the men, the strong men with the spears and the knives and the swords and whatnot, went and destroyed all of our matriarchs. It wouldn't be a matriarchal society anymore. The only defense against that would be the men stepping in to protect. And so the men have some role in saying what goes. And it literally comes down to steel and blood and muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fact. That is a fact.
I think it comes down to more than that. I think it comes down to, I think that if it comes down to conflict, men are the ones who are more capable of enforcing and imposing their ideologies, But I also think that men are also more inclined to being leaders than women are, like in terms of their
aptitudes.
Yeah, their aptitudes and just their general disposition.
Yeah.
I feel like men are more likely to step up and take that role.
Yeah. I do think from my experience, I don't think this is a universal rule necessarily, but from my experience, that men are far better equipped to take themselves and their emotion out of a situation and to deliberate more objectively. There's a lot of feminists who are going to be upset with that remark, but listen, I have a lot of women in my life, and I just know that to be the case.
Yeah,
and that's related to the compassion that's slowly destroying our culture.
Yeah. I think there are definitely some women. All men and women are not equal, you know. There are some women who are, well, just in terms of like physicality, there are some women who are very big and very strong
Yep.
and very physically capable.
Yep.
And they might actually be able to like beat some men in a fight. But those men who they're going to be able to beat in a fight are also going to get their asses handed to them by like 99% of men.
Correct.
And the toughest woman in the world is not going to be a match for the toughest man in the world.
100%.
It's just not, that kind of equality does not exist. So just in terms of physicality, there's that to consider. And then in terms of like that leadership aspect, I think that there are some women who might be better leaders than some men, you know,
For sure.
but I don't think that that is their position to take, you know, like I don't think that that's a good idea. And I do think that it boils down to what you were talking about like the emotional nature of women and things like that. And that's not to say that there aren't a whole bunch of men who are like that, because there are, but those men are not supposed to be leaders. You know, maybe they're supposed to be leaders in some kind of limited capacity in their life. You know, they get married to some woman and they can be the leaders in that aspect of their life, but that dude's never going to be president. He's never going to be captain of the football team, you know?
Yeah. And I would say that it's certainly not the case that every man is equipped to be a leader. That's for sure.
100%.
And Joe, I mean, like Joe says this all the time, but
Joe Rogan.
Yeah. But there's nothing more dangerous than a weak man.
Yeah.
And that is the truth, man.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know about you, but I gotta pee. We've been drinking beer over here.
Yeah, we can wrap it up. We didn't touch on Terrence Howard at all.
Oh, we gotta.
We don't have to. You know,
we should. we should. Damn. What's the most the?
Oh, I don't even fucking know.
You don't even know. You wouldn't what you would prioritize.
I'll just say this about the Terrence Howard episode of Joe Rogan. Does he come off as very intelligent? 100%. Does he also come off as like maybe a little crazy? Yes. But just because he's crazy doesn't mean that he's wrong about everything he said. And also just because he's very intelligent doesn't mean that he's right about everything he said.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff in there that I thought was very interesting, very thought-provoking, some of which may be like true. And if you listen to this podcast, it'll come as no surprise that it wouldn't surprise me at all if there was, maybe he is right about some of it and maybe it's being suppressed. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
But there was some stuff that like definitely like had my spidey senses going up.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like it's a midwit thing to do. Like somebody you'll be arguing with someone on Twitter and you'll, post a typo and they'll be like, you spelled this wrong. You're a fucking idiot. And it's like, okay, you're fucking retarded.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do that too much, but I do think that there were things about the way that he spoke that made me think that maybe he's not as smart as maybe he like comes off sometimes, but I don't know, man. Like I said, I do think that he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
But I think that maybe he just doesn't have like super high verbal IQ because he said some things like he kept.
Well, neither does Elon Musk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Elon Musk doesn't say things as bad as Terrence Howard did. Like, he kept saying there's an element on the elemental,
periodic
table called manganese, and he kept saying magnese, which I thought was funny as hell. I think that when we get to a point when our podcast blows up and we're like doing things like Tom and Bert where they're creating alcohol, they have like a vodka now. We should create something called magnese. But it's manganese. And he kept doing, there were a few things like that I can't really remember all of them off the top of my head. But it's like, I don't know.
We'll do a deep dive on Terrence Howard and Joe Rogan's conversation the next time, or we'll at least dedicate more time to it because I think it was very interesting.
Yeah.
I really think that a conversation that involves someone like Elon Musk with Terrence Howard would be very, very interesting to listen to,
for sure.
because when he's talking about specifically his patents and those inventions, I would love to see an engineer or somebody with the mind for it to really get into it. Same thing when he was talking about the redesign of the periodic table and the relationship between the elements and the, how it relates to music. Fuck, that was cool.
Yeah.
That's, and the stuff that Terrence did in the room over completely with my own, which I thought was interesting. But he's an actor, and he's going to have a hard time being taken seriously.
Yeah.
So I just think there's a lot of good stuff.
What did you think of the 1 × 1 = 1 thing?
Yeah, man, I didn't really wrap my brain around it. I
don't think that there's much to wrap your brain around. Like, I just think that that's one of those things that, like, just because he's super smart doesn't mean that he's right about everything.
Yeah.
And when you start talking about multiplication and equations like that, there's a way in which 1 × 1 = 1 is just a sentence. It's just like saying something.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you view it like that, when you view it as a statement and not like some kind of like mystical mathematic equation, it's like, I don't understand what you're arguing with. One time is 1.
Yeah.
And 1 2 times, you got 2 1s. That's 2.
See, he did say that. He did specifically say that saying multiplication doesn't mean 1 times. He said multiplication.
But I think it does,
multiplication implies having more on the other side of the equal sign than you started with. And I don't know the full gist of this, but if you saw his T-shirt, it was mostly partly covered up. It had the square root of 2. So I think there was something there about, because when you square something, that's a multiplication function. And when you take the square root, that's like a dividing function. It's the opposite. Taking the square root is the opposite of squaring something, right?
Gotcha.
Just like multiplication and division are opposites. So when he said the square root of 2 on a shirt, I don't know if I literally am afraid to say this on the air because it might be wrong, but assuming the answer is 1 or something.
Yeah.
How can the square root of 2 be 1 and 1 × 1? I see what I mean. There's something in there. I think maybe
I've never been a math guy.
Yeah, I'm not a math guy. All right.
Another thing that we didn't really get to is that Harrison Butker.
Oh shit, yeah.
So I don't know if you're open to this, but if you can like sneak down here someday, we could just do like an episode where I'm at my house and we just jump on and like bullshit about some things real quick.
I can easily do that.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, we could do that.
Well, maybe try to do it like Wednesday or something.
All right, it's a good idea. But my bladder's gonna burst.
Yeah, I'm feeling you.
All right, guys, thanks for hanging with us today. It's been a long time since Kyle and I got back. It's been over a month.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
All right, love you, buddy. Here we go.
Adios.